Hey everyone, Max here with another video about Princess Connect. In this video, I want to cover some of the future content additions to the game that gets added over the next year and a half. And I won't be going into too much detail here because that make the video too long, and I plan to make separate videos covering specific topics in the future. So the first thing that gets added is Very Hard, or VH bosses to story events. VH bosses will be part of story events beginning with the first summer event, which is expected about 2 months from now for the global server. VH bosses are very challenging initially, and most players will need 2 to 3 turns to kill a VH boss. Over time they get easier. By around the time of the Halloween event, most players will be able to 1-turn kill a VH boss. To prepare for the first couple of VH bosses, I suggest raising the following characters that are currently available. For tanks, Pudding, June, and Nozomi. For physical DPS, Kaori, Makoto, Shiori, Suzuna, and Arisa. For magical DPS, Akari and the soon-to-be-released Kyoka. And finally for supports, Yukari, Yui, and Kokoro. And when I mention these characters, not any single one of them is actually required to be able to beat a VH boss, but having them raised will give you an easier time overall. Moving on, shortly after the implementation of VH bosses, the EX dungeon is released. The EX dungeon boss is a giant chimera, and it's a step up in terms of difficulty compared to the VH dungeon. You can't really beat the EX dungeon boss with a stall team. Or I should say you can, but it's really time consuming and you would only do that for first time clears. To beat the EX dungeon normally, you need about 3 to 4 fully built teams. Currently available characters that are especially useful for the EX dungeon include Pudding, June, and Nozomi for tanks, Kaori, Makoto, and Tamaki for physical DPS, and Yukari and Yui for supports. Of course, these are not the only characters you want to raise. You want to have other characters raised in addition to the ones I mentioned to make sure you can actually field about 4 to 5 teams. About a month after the release of the EX dungeon, Luna Tower gets added to the game. Luna Tower is a recurring monthly event that's open for about 5 days a month, and your goal is to climb to the top of the tower. Your progress in Luna Tower gets saved in between sessions, so for example, if you finish floor 60 1 month before it closed, the next time it's open, you'll start on floor 61. Every time Luna Tower is open, new floors get added. Initially, Luna Tower started with 70 floors. On the JP server, which is about 3 years ahead of where we are, it's up to over 500 floors. The important thing to know about Luna Tower is that your team's HP and TP gets carried over from floor to floor, and if any characters die, you'll be unable to use them for Luna Tower for the rest of the day. Well-prepared players can expect to fully clear Luna Tower on the day of its release, or maybe on the next day. Weaker players will run out of characters and might be unable to clear Luna Tower before it closes. To prepare for Luna Tower, you really just want to have a large number of characters raised, and this is especially so for tanks and supports because you tend to run out of those more quickly than you run out of DPS characters. Also, both PvP and CB characters will be useful. PvP characters, meaning characters like Tamaki, Pudding, or later on, limited story event character Halloween Pudding. And CB characters, of course, include characters like Kaori, Makoto, June, and the archers. After Luna Tower, the next thing that gets added is unique equipment. Now, the timing of unique equipment is a little bit uncertain here, because on the original JP version of the game, unique equipment was not added until the Twilight Breakers event, which is about 2 months after Luna Tower was released. However, on the CN server, unique equipment was implemented alongside Luna Tower. So depending on what Crunchyroll does, we can expect unique equipment anywhere from July to September of this year. Unique equipment is basically a character-specific piece of equipment that has its own slot on the character page. And once equipped, your character gets attribute bonuses as well as a modification of her first skill. Unique equipment is a really major change to the game because it brought a lot of formerly useless or off-meta characters into the meta. And it's also very friendly to F2P players because the materials you need are all farmed. Unique equipment gets released in monthly batches, and every month anywhere from 3 to 9 characters will get their unique equipment added to the game. In terms of preparing for unique equipment, the main thing you want to do is to take note that some of the useless or weak characters right now become very good with their unique equipment. And if you want to prepare for the release of unique equipment, the best thing you can do is to start farming those characters so that when their unique equipment releases, they are ready to be used. And I plan to make a video soon about unique equipment, more specifically what they require, what they do, and which characters get good with their unique equipment so that you can focus your farming efforts a bit better. Now, after the release of unique equipment, and from here on out I'll be fairly brief because we're pretty far into the future, around the first anniversary of the game, the EX2 dungeon is released. And like the EX dungeon, it's fairly challenging at release. If you want to take a look at what the EX2 dungeon is like, you can watch one of my recent videos on this channel which shows what is required to beat the EX2 dungeon at release. A couple of months after the release of EX2 dungeon, we'll begin to see reprint events. Reprint events are basically reruns of early story events, and it starts with the very first story event, Tatsune's Present Panic. Once reprint events are introduced, we'll start to see 2 story events per month, a new story event and a reprint event. What you want to know about reprint events is that all of the gem bonuses from the first time around, for example, for clearing the maps or from the event gacha, are refreshed for the reprint events, the only exception being the gems you get from watching the story. So it's a nice addition to the monthly gem income of free-to-play players or low spenders. Moving on, and this will be the last thing I cover in this video, after about 1.6 or 1.7 years after the end of the summer events in the second year, 6 stars are added to the game. And you can look at 6 star as basically unique equipment version 2.0. A character that has had their 6 star unlocked gets attribute bonuses and a modified union burst. Like with unique equipment, it's very F2P friendly because all of the 6 stars that have been added to the game so far have been of farmable characters, and all the materials you need are farmed. One thing you want to know about 6 star is that almost all of the 6 star characters are very good, and it brought back many formerly useless or weak characters back into the meta so that they can be used once again. And after the release of 6 stars, both the CB and PvP meta will be largely shaped by which characters have had a recent 6 star release, and it continues to be that way to this day on the JP server. So that's all for this video, and I will see you next time.